Great. Thank you so much, Nicola, for organizing this. And thanks so much, everybody, for being here. It's really great to see lots of faces on the screen. I think it's nicer to see people's actual faces rather than just, a black screen. And so the fact that that's what I can see is really encouraging for me. And as we'll see from the technology we're going to talk about today, it's a really critical part for how we use technology in our coaching practice. Thought it would just be helpful to set the scene a little bit and explain why I think it's important that we talk about this particular technology today, and also to sort of set our expectations for what we're about to see in the video, because I know that a number of you submitted questions and the original registration form, and a lot of those were to do with artificial intelligence, which is an absolutely fascinating topic, and I've written books about it, and it is quite interesting, but that's not what we're here to talk about today, even though it is somewhat relevant. Today, we're here to talk about immersive technologies, and that can sometimes be called virtual reality or augmented reality or extended reality or spatial computing, but essentially relates to something that looks like this. Some sort of headset you stick over your eyes, and then you have entered into a different sort of environment. And the sort of technology that we're going to show today allows you to meet with people in a virtual environment where we're interacting. It's a sort of halfway house between the video, where we're a two-dimensional rectangle on each other's screens, and a more three-dimensional representation of ourselves, similar to the avatar that I have just switched my appearance to. So I don't know if you've used these avatars in Zoom before, but it kind of represents a certain version of myself, which doesn't do anything particularly exciting. I can't even wink, but it does allow me to speak naturally, show absolutely no body language whatsoever, but at least it is me. The reason why I think we should talk about this, I'll say two key things: the reason why we should talk about technology and the reason why we should be talking about this particular technology. The reason we should be talking about technology as coaches is because technology forms a fundamental part of our coaching experience. And so we're seeing it today. We're using Zoom. A lot of us will use Zoom or some sort of video conferencing solution in the delivery of our coaching. And that therefore has entered into our coaching relationship, whether we like it or not. So the ability to use Zoom well is going to make us a better coach, which is the same. You could say the same is true of a facilitator or a conference speaker. Actually, if you're able to do that well using the video conferencing platform, it creates a better experience. And particularly in coaching, because it's one-to-one and it's about the relationship, it's about building trust and rapport. If we are at a different stage in our maturity to our coachee, that's likely to risk breaking that rapport. So particularly if I'm extremely skilled at using the technology and my coachee is not, then me going too quickly as we're starting to use technology is going to make them feel on edge. And if they're extremely competent and I'm not, then me struggling to find where the buttons are for things is going to make me appear as if I'm irrelevant and incompetent. And that's going to break the trust. So what we need to be doing is to increase our understanding of what technology is available, particularly where our coachees are, and then meeting them where they are as far as our use of technology is concerned. Now, the reason why immersive technologies today is because we are at a pivotal point in history. Technology is changing everything. We've seen that with the emergence of generative AI over the last 12 to 18 months. But particularly right now, we're at a point where Apple has entered the scene of immersive technologies. And when Apple moves into a new place in technology, consumer behavior tends to follow. Now, we might think, oh, who needs a virtual reality headset? Surely Apple is just doing it for the innovators right at the bleeding edge of technology. To a certain extent, that's true. It's hideously expensive what they're selling. $3,500 the headset will put you back, and there's only a limited number, and so only a limited number of people can have access to it. But people said a similar thing when the iPad was released. And if you remember the launch of the iPad, and I watched the live launch of it back in 2007, whenever it was that it came out, people said, who wants a laptop with no keyboard? Or who wants a phone on which you can't make phone calls and is too big to fit in your pocket? This is not serving any sort of need. And yet Now, it's very common for us to see tablets around everywhere, and it's likely that people on this call have them as well. When Apple released the smartwatch, it was not the case that Apple released the first smartwatch ever. There were lots of smartwatches that already existed. It was quite possible. And Apple's smartwatch was extremely, and still is extremely expensive. But now everybody has an Apple Watch. You kind of expect people to have that. When Apple released the AirPods, that was something like 20, 30 years after Bluetooth headphones became available. They're not particularly high quality. They're extremely expensive, but there is a time in the use of Bluetooth headphones, which was before Apple released it and Apple after released it, and suddenly everybody has them. Virtual reality headsets, similarly, have been around for a very long time. Apple have released their virtual reality headset just this month, actually, first this month. And so as a result, a number of other players that have been around the virtual reality space have started to release their alternatives. What Apple is doing is extremely beautiful, as they always do, very professionally minded. And so these other devices are catching up. And what is going to happen, I think, is that consumers will start to pick up their devices and start to therefore expect that we would be able to meet remotely using virtual reality headsets. And once you've tried it once, you discover that this is so much more pleasant than meeting through video conferencing. It's much more like being with somebody physically. And the technology that we're going to share the video of today is not one that uses the virtual reality headset, but gives us an early experience of what it can be like to meet remotely using avatars, and is kind of enough to show how pleasant it is. And whoever's dog that is, Michelle, thank you very much. Very welcome. I wish that I had a dog in the same room as me as well. I am just going to pass over to David to add a few more comments, and then we can watch this video together.
Thank you there, Sam. Yeah, and it's fascinating looking back at the development of technology in coaching and mentoring and supervision, and just realizing just how far it's gone. From way back in the early 1980s, when coaching was just being talked about, into the 1990s, when British Telecom was experimenting with monkeys, putting chips on their heads, on their skull, to see if they could to get them to communicate together. They decided that this was a socially unacceptable technology, and it went down the drain very quickly. But we're not that far away from that now. With Elon Musk has been experimenting with technology that puts a chip in the brain. It's highly likely that within a couple of decades, it will be routine for people to communicate with colleagues simply using the chip in the brain. Wherever they are in the world. Now, you can think of some of the issues relating to that. You can be woken up by somebody in Japan saying, "Oh, I just thought I'd like to chat this over with you. Thanks very much." Every technology comes with positives and with downsides on it. Every technology creates jobs as well as destroys jobs. The way that technology creates more jobs is that typically it makes things cheaper and easier to access. And when things are cheaper and easier to access, more people use them. They become available to more people, and therefore you create a whole infrastructure to support that. That's whether that historical process is going to continue. We don't know. Is there a finite end to it? We don't know. But if we look at it in terms of us as providers of coach and mentor and supervision education, we've really got two issues here. Firstly, how do we help coaches or train coaches to be able to use this technology themselves, to be able to be at least as advanced in it, as Sam was indicating, as their clients will be? How do we cope with how do we educate them to the ethical challenges around all of these things? And when we look at coach education, we can see it's split into two basic varieties. There's the process-based thing, which is all about how do you the approach that says how do you fit it, how do you demonstrate these particular competencies. a lot of the research, the coach maturity group, research group, looking at these things, querying quite strongly whether that's relevant, given that in the tomorrow's world, given that most of the process stuff can be done better by an AI already than it can by a beginner coach. It's what the coach brings on top of that themselves that they bring that actually makes for the quality of coaching. So the other side is experiential. So how do we enable people to learn to coach? Just as you don't learn to be an aircraft pilot by reading a book. You learn to be an aircraft pilot in simulation, in doing it, in crashing your plane time and time again until you learn how not to do that. The future of coach education, I'm going to suggest very strongly, will increasingly lie in simulation, in helping people, in putting people, just as supervision helps you experience other people's cases and learn from other people's cases. The future of coach education is going to be increasingly in terms of simulation through virtual reality in particular. So we have some challenges here and some opportunities. It's going to take some quite significant mind shifts away from the way that we used to do things to the way that the world will be doing things in 5 years' time. Or maybe it's not 5 years, maybe it's 2 years or even 1 year. Things are moving fast. Back to you, Sam.
Thanks, David. Yeah, and I think just to highlight, there's a group of us that meet up once a month to talk about how technology is affecting the world of coaching, called the Coach Tech Collective. And we were talking this morning about the fact that virtual reality and connected technologies, immersive technologies in general, have very specific, obvious use cases in a training context for simulating those sort of scenarios which are dangerous or difficult to recreate cheaply within a training environment. So particularly warfare, nuclear waste disposal, medical situations, these sorts of things, virtual reality is quite obviously usable in that context. But the way that we are particularly thinking about using it today is to use it as a meeting platform. So the video that we're about to show you is in a tool that's called Mibo. We are using a free account, which restricts the number of users to, I think it's 5 in one setting, but you can pay for a license which gives you a limit of 25, which is sizable enough for almost every client organization we'd be using, unless we're running a large event. And we are each joining from our separate locations. And so the people who are on the call, David and I, are based in the UK, along with Nicola, who's acting as a sort of camera operator for the scene. We also have Uta, and Uta is on the call with us today, and she's based in Germany. And then there is also Andrew, who is based in Sydney, Australia. So he's not here today because it is 1 o'clock in the morning for him at the moment, but you'll see him on the call as well. And Uta, I'm sure, will be able to talk to us after we've watched this video. So Nicola, if we're okay, we could watch the beginning of that. Would be great.
Yeah, well, it's nice to be in a different environment for starters, and it's good to see the faces. What I'm missing is I'm used to Zoom showing also my face, and the names. I'm glad Sam has a name tag. I remember the names of the few people that are in this space. Also, that is something. Without a name tag, I think we've gotten very lazy in memorizing people's names because of MS Teams and Zoom showing us the names. But yeah, I feel it's a good place to be, sitting comfortable on the sofa and in the armchair.
Well, Uta, you're obviously a pro, because as you came in, there is actually a box of name tags, lanyards over in the corner there that you could virtually pick up on your way in. So thank you for picking one up. And yes, I made sure that I did that for myself as well. But for this small group, I think it's okay. Andrew, how about from your perspective? You're joining from completely the other side of the world, and Uta's joining from Europe, and Andrew in Australia. So what's it like?
It's really interesting because Uta, you said that you kind of missed the Zoom experience with the names and the setup of the speed, but I find the way this is set up is much more conversationally enabling. And it's actually a little mind game that's going on in my head, rather than just having static square boxes with faces in them. We're kind of sat in the room, and it definitely changes the environment in which we're working, even though it's looking a bit cartoonish. So yeah, it's definitely as a way of breaking through, and I guess it's the stiffness of those little boxes that we've become accustomed to being put into. And apologies for my rank amateurs with not getting my name back as I came. I think I was so busy trying to hustle my way into it. I didn't pick up.
Well, thank you for raising that interesting point, because as you're even saying that, I can tell that your voice is coming more into my right ear than my left, because you're sitting towards my right. And I've done the absolute amateur thing as far as a facilitator is concerned. And rather than sitting on one of the armchairs where I can see people clearly, I've sat right next to David. So I need to now physically turn to make sure I include him. So David, from your perspective, what's this experience like?
I think this is very this is very cozy. You know, it's we've got more than just a head, and we've got head and shoulders, but more. There's a sense of physical presence here, and I'm experiencing that physical presence even better than with an avatar, because it's the human there as well. So I think it's a nice bridge between Zoom or Teams or whatever and a face-to-face meeting. So for me, I feel more relaxed into the conversation, and at the moment I've got half of Sam because of the angle that we're taking. So I know that I can get up and go and walk around and get a better view of everybody, or Sam could, but it's fine once you get used to moving around in this space. It feels a lot more comfortable.
Well, and thank you for mentioning movement. So let's try to incorporate that a little bit into what we're doing here. So I'm going to just click on the screen, which should allow me to stand up. And so I'm now no longer sitting on the chair. And if we consider this area up here as you know, being in an amateur state, we've just had our first impressions. Now we can go deeper into the experience by moving down the stairs that over in this corner over here. On the way, you may want to see if there's a hat or something sitting on the side to put on. So Uta, just behind you, I can see there's a pirate hat on the floor. You might want to put that on. I think from memory, I'm wearing a baseball cap, but I can't see my own face, as Uta pointed out. So I'll head down the stairs, and if you'd like to follow me, then I'll see you at the table at the bottom. Okay, should we pause the video at this point, Nicola, and open up the conversation a little bit? I mean, Uta, you were there, and so it might be good to hear directly from the horse's mouth. You know, what was the experience like for you? And then we'll see what questions have come up from people.
Yeah, so it was exciting. It was interesting from a perspective of how is it, because we were running a real meeting. We were meeting because we had a purpose. It was not just for fun, because the first time when we did it, Sam, in the Coach Collective, it was to experiment with the tool as such. But for this video, we had more of a purpose. So there was more at stake. And so having had, you know, the opportunity to play with it before, you know, going to a meeting where something was at stake, helped me to feel more familiar already with the environment. And that's why I had the name tag. Not because I am a pro, but because I had practiced and exercised a little bit with that before. So it's like with Zoom, you learn as you go to explore the technology. And yeah, I enjoyed it. It was nice.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to have you part of that conversation. I would love to welcome questions, comments, observations, thoughts, philosophies from people who are here. And thanks for putting your hand up. Kathleen, your face is first on my screen, so let's go to you first.
Thanks, Sam and David and Uta. It was brilliant, fascinating. I was curious, how were you doing that? Because you didn't look like you were wearing goggles. So how was the whole experience happening?
Yes, well, it's David. Why don't you explain, as somebody who is definitely a user of the tool rather than an evangelist for it necessarily? It'd be good to hear what the experience is like for you.
I think that with the big box, I've got where's my big box? So I think the grandchildren have got it at the moment. But the big goggles and things, it is very intrusive. Yeah, and it's hard on the eyes after a while. And I usually need somebody more technically oriented person to help me get going into it and maneuver around in it. This experience in Mibo is actually much simpler. It still requires some manual dexterity. So kids that play the gaming community just will just walk into this and say, "What's the problem?" Somebody in my generation just have to. It takes us longer to get used to moving the things around and getting down the stairs and doing all the things that come instinctively to somebody younger. But you do it, you get there, and after a little bit of practice, it just becomes common nature. And so I think it's a very simple way of taking that step into the virtual world, feeling comfortable in the virtual world. Once you've done that, then there's all sorts of things that you can do beyond that to go much more deeply and to try different things. I mean, we were talking earlier about using virtual reality as to practice things. I didn't give an example, but one of the things that occurs to this, something that comes up quite often in supervision, is somebody will start talking about, a client will start talking about, will suddenly drop on you the fact that they were sexually abused as a child. Bang! What do you do in that situation? You can read books around this, but what you can't do in any other format except virtual reality is step into that situation, somebody doing this, and then go into their body and watch yourself struggling to deal with that issue and how you do it. Your body language, your all of those things. The potential to really engage at a distance with clients is vast, and we're only just tinkering at the surface right now.
Yeah, thank you. And it's absolutely true that to meet somebody in full-on virtual reality has got that there's a cost associated with it, reasonably significant cost. The price of that headset that I showed you earlier is about $300, something like that, for that headset, which is, it's not so ridiculously expensive. Nobody can ever afford it anywhere. It's about the same price as a lot of people's phones, but it is an investment, and it's logistically difficult. So if we were to say, oh, we're going to meet in virtual reality, we'd have to set a time, agree on which app we're going to use, make sure we've got it downloaded and it's updated, and then put the headset physically on and sign in, and there's too many steps to follow. Whereas Mibo is a single link to click, and then it is open on your screen in front of you, and then you're using the keyboard and the mouse to navigate. So you use the arrow keys on the keyboard to physically walk and the mouse to look around. I noticed a couple of questions just dropped into the chat. So questions, comments, and so I just thought I'd acknowledge them and address them because they're relatively simple ones to answer. There's a question about seasickness, a sense of nausea, that when you're looking at the screen and looking all over the place. That's on Mibo, that just isn't an issue at all for anybody. It cannot be, because the vision that you're having is directly controlled by the mouse that you're using. And so if you want to move the field of view, then you move your mouse and it goes with you. And if you want it to be static, then you just don't touch anything and it is static. So you don't feel seasick. People have said that you get a sense of nausea from wearing a headset. That tends to happen when you're experiencing like going on a roller coaster. So it is moving, but in reality, you're just sitting still. And that combination, that's what makes us feel seasick. But most of the environments that we're talking about here, where you'd be meeting somebody, you're staying still so long as you're standing still. And if you move, it moves with you, and so that you don't get a sense of nausea with them. The second thing is there are a couple of comments about how frustrating it feels that we're in such a cartoonish environment. It's obviously so highly stylized. It's obviously not real, and therefore that we must lose our sense of immersion as a result of that, or it feels inappropriate for executive coaching. It absolutely does increase the level of playfulness in the room. It's very difficult to go there and remain very serious the whole time. But the fact that it is so overly stylized means that there's no question that the place that we're in is real. And so we just immediately accept it. Okay, we're in a virtual place, let's talk. Whereas if it is designed in order to look as real as possible, the fact that it isn't is going to give us moments of cognitive dissonance where we enter this uncanny valley where somebody looks real, but it isn't quite real, or that the movement isn't exactly how we'd expect it to be. So actually it increases the sense of immersion, the fact that it is so cartoonish.
And maybe we should add that there are different scenarios on Mibo that you can choose. You can go to that island, you can go to the studio. We went to the studio. So depending on what you want to do with your group, with the team, you can select an environment that might be conducive to the task at hand. And then it's that playfulness that comes to life with the environment that you choose.
Yes, absolutely. Andrew dropped a question in. What's the difference between the metaverse without and Mibo? Well, metaverse is one of these little nebulous concepts that sort of means lots of things and nothing at the same time. A version of the metaverse that we're able to access, unless, I mean, I'm saying it as if it's a thing. It isn't a thing. It's sort of a concept, really. You can use the filters. Well, on Zoom, when there's a bunch of people on this call who have got fake background, that's augmented reality. The background that's behind you isn't real. So it's a digital, it's digital content that's being presented onto something which otherwise is real. So that is starting to enter the metaverse. If we add an avatar in there as well, then of course that's more digital content, but the human there is still real. The thing I'm excited about with this sort of technology is that Zoom feels like the technology is so present. It's very difficult to have a conversation without constantly being aware of the fact that we're using Zoom. But when you're in something immersive, particularly with a headset on, the technology disappears and suddenly we're meeting each other and it feels more like we're in the same room. Adriana, your hand was up. It would be great to hear from you, please. Thank you for waiting.
Yes, thank you. Thanks first for the initial presentation, and one question from me for clarification. So the user experience, you had the VR headset and the image was created also within the headset. Is that correct?
Thank you for asking the question. No, that isn't correct. We were doing this on laptops, so this is accessible for all of us immediately. We didn't use a headset for this particular demonstration.
All right. Okay.
They're in virtual reality using headsets, and that is it's much more immersive when you're wearing a headset, because then you physically turn and the sound moves around you, or you physically move and you're changing your location in the virtual environment, whereas with this it was on the laptop screen. We'd met on Zoom and then went into a different meeting space.
You're trying to just clarify, because I think maybe other people are confused as well. There are stages in this, and what we presented there is the simplest way in which you can get into this world. Okay, yeah. So I come actually from the tech world, so I do know the technology behind. So I wanted to understand what exactly was presented. Yeah, thanks very much.
Thank you. I'm going to pronounce this wrong.
Don't worry, it's Taina. Don't worry. Sorry, before I ask my question, can I just clarify? So the video that we just watched, just on the back of Adriana's question now, because I had the impression that you guys were in a virtual environment using like the goggles rather than. So what you're suggesting is that you sort of entered that environment through your laptop, like just clicking on. And instead of seeing like the Zoom screen, you were seeing that room with the chairs and the window.
Yes. So the video, the sort of camera location that you were watching them was either through what I was seeing on my screen or what Nicola was seeing on her screen.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So my question was, well, maybe it's irrelevant slightly after this clarification with the laptop, but I was just thinking in work with the clients and just thinking of how this work sort of will progress, because there's going to be, like, I accept that the world will go there, like both our clients and the coaches will be in a virtual environment in how many years' time. As we go there, what's your take on like whose almost like responsibility will be to offer the service? And will the service include the goggles and all of that? So would you have like a coaching package that, or we're meeting in a virtual environment and, you know, this comes with the equipment and comes with all of this? Or would you expect the clients to almost jump ahead that curve and start purchasing them themselves and then looking for a virtual coach and all of that? Because I just don't see that transition happening that soon.
Yes, I hope that I've made clear from the beginning, I don't think that we should be out forcing technology onto people. That's not our job. But I would compare this to what happened in 2020. So in 2018, 2019, there were a bunch of coaches out there that would tend to meet through Zoom. A lot of coaches didn't and said, oh, you know, have to be there in person to do good coaching, but Zoom was there as an option. And often the coaches would have their own Zoom license and so send a link. Sometimes the person would say, well, actually, I meet in Teams. And so you would use their Teams account. And so you sort of bumble through and you do whatever makes most sense. In 2020, there was this forced move where we can't meet in person and therefore we have to just use whichever platform is the right one for us. So it might be that there is a point where our client buys themselves a headset and they are starting to do all of their meetings in virtual reality. And so we say, oh, you know, let's set up our next session. And they say, no worries, here's my VR link. My position on this is, if we're getting ourselves ready now, when we get that message, we'll go, oh, today's the day, that's fun. And those who aren't in this room are going to go, what? What's a VR link? What do I do? I've got no idea. I just have no frame of reference for this. So you're right. Nobody next week is going to insist that we meet using Mibo or some kind of VR meeting platform. But us thinking about it, getting ourselves ready, starting to experiment with it, puts us in the right position.
Thank you.
I'm just noticing there are some really interesting questions in the chat about, can our smartphones fit into a headset? If you're wearing goggles, how can clients' faces be seen? I wonder, David, you've seen it, so I'm kind of looking at you to see if you think this is a good idea. That video of Mark Zuckerberg in the metaverse, do you think that would be worth sharing? Let's go to Dominika for your question and
hi. Well, hi everybody. I'm in Warsaw, in Poland, and actually this goes very smoothly to just the recent, let's say, talk about this 2020, because my thoughts are with what I've seen, that what you've shown is very artificial, and maybe it's, you know, it's just the beginning. It's nice to see, but I would not imagine to use it, right? Because for me it's too artificial. But my attitude was the same for this switch from a meeting face to face to online. For me, having mentoring online was a disaster, because I couldn't see the person in reality to make the relationship, you know, rapport, or to see the body language and everything. And it took me, I'm saying from my perspective, okay, it took me quite a long way to be able to be a good mentor online. Mm-hmm. And now, when I see my work, and even after COVID stopped, I said, oh, fantastic, I can come back to, you know, face to face. It didn't happen because of different reasons. People have no time to travel, there are traffic jams, or they are different locations. Before COVID, I only had people from Warsaw. Now I have mentees from different places in Poland. Sometimes we meet, but it's just, to meet, for having, a relationship, but all the sessions goes online. And I'm very conservative myself, but with the, let's say, it was something I couldn't stop because it was the technology and the situation. And now I think the same will be with the virtual reality. Today I cannot imagine, maybe the film was artificial, but in some time it will be real. So it will be like this bridge between our experience historically with face-to-face meetings online, and now we will have virtual reality. So there is you could see, you can feel, you can. It will be a really, let's say, improvement to the normal Zoom meeting. And as you, Sam, said, I believe it is the technology advancement that will come. And in some time, we will have those whatever Googles, everybody, because it will be just a normal tool for everybody. So we will have it at home. So it will be no problem. Like now, the link for Zoom is normal. In some time, you will have all those tools to be able to connect in virtual reality. And we will all, being old guys, we will have to follow, because otherwise we will be dead.
There we go. Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, it's a different experience, isn't it? Delivering coaching, mentoring, supervision online rather than in person. I would also throw in there, because remember, we used to do this and it used to be quite a good thing to do. I still really like it, delivering coaching via the phone.
Yeah.
I don't know if people still do much coaching via the phone. I really like coaching via phone, and I compare that to virtual reality when you're using avatars, because you've still got that full audio experience. You've got an element of the body language. It's not like a video, but even on Zoom, when you've got video, there's this minute lag, isn't there? And that can sometimes get in the way. So I don't think that any of us are sort of suggesting all of us should wholeheartedly, as of tomorrow, do all of our coaching using something like this. It's just, here's an alternative which might work with some clients.
If you think about it as in terms of coach education, which everybody on the call is in the area of coach education, there's two parallel lines here. There's how we develop and grow ourselves, and how the technology is developing and growing around us. And those two lines are going to cross and intersect in multiple ways over the next few years. The challenge for us is, how do we actually do this in a planned, I was going to say systematic way, but maybe that's not even possible. A lot of it's serendipity, but actually seeing ourselves growing as the technology grows, and being able to steer a path that enables us to keep enough up to date not to be left behind.
I think I'm going to try to play this video, which I think is one of the most powerful videos in just sort of bringing to life, this is what is possible.
This is so great. Lighting change? Wow.
Yeah, we can put the light anywhere.
And it doesn't feel awkward to be really close to you.
No, it does. I actually moved you back a few feet before you got into the headset. You were like right here.
I don't know if people can see this, but this is incredible. The realism here is just incredible. Where am I? Where are you, Mark? Where are we?
You're in Austin, right?
No, I mean this place. We're shrouded by darkness with ultra realistic face, and it just feels like we're in the same room. This is really the most incredible thing I've ever seen. And sorry to be in your personal space.
I mean,
We have done jiu-jitsu before.
Yeah, no, I was commenting to the team before that even that I feel like we've choked each other from further distances than it feels like we are right now.
I mean, this is just really incredible. I don't know how to describe it with words. It really feels like we're in the same room.
So the headsets that they're using in there are more expensive than my headset. They're not quite as expensive as the Apple one, actually. They're using the Meta Quest Pro, and I expect that there will be an update to that. If you watch that entire interview that they do there, which is quite easy to find online, Mark Zuckerberg talks about how they're trying to close the gap to allow people to have that sort of experience as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible. So at the moment, they've gone through a process of going to a special location, having their photograph taken in 3D, creating these avatars that they can then represent themselves in this ultra realistic way. And what he basically says is, well, the cost of doing that is just so high and it's very inconvenient for people to do that. It would be nice to get close enough when you just take your phone out, take some pictures of yourself, and then create your own virtual avatar. There's a really interesting research paper, and it's from quite a while ago now, but it talks about this thing called the uncanny valley, where as things become closer to being human, they appear more attractive to us until they become almost but not quite human. And then they become extremely unattractive. So when you see a puppy and the puppy sort of inquisitively raises its eyebrow, the fact that it looks a bit like a person makes it really cute. But if the puppy had an actual human face, that feels like a nightmare. It sort of dives deep into this uncanny valley piece. So that's why they've got that sort of stylized piece in the tool that we're using, which, you know, isn't trying to use our real bodies, not trying to replicate that, but it can get to this experience where he says several times, it just feels like we're in the same room. The experience is effectively the same. The technology has now disappeared and we're just having the conversation. I'm aware that we've got breakout rooms that it would be nice to use, and we've got a couple of hands up. So if we work through the hands and then we'll try to go into breakouts, that's probably best.
So Sam, just in case you struggle with my name, it's Tineke.
Tineke, that's what I was going to guess, but it was going to be a guess. So yeah, please.
I could get that feeling. But this question is actually for David. David, here we go. So I do have a tech background long ago, in my previous life before coaching. So I'm not scared of tech. But for me in coaching, I think one's got to be quite selective in what technical advancements would actually also enhance our coaching experience. So we can be tech slaves, or we can say, will this tech serve me, or will it just take over, or will it hinder? So coaching has a special flavor, and I find that having moved from face-to-face to Zoom has been, for me personally, effortless, and it's been extremely freeing, and it hasn't taken away from the coaching experience at all. I mean, the body language, the sound of the voice, the throat, the everything, I feel that person is very close to me, and Zoom doesn't get in the way. I want to know with this avatar, almost my sense is, it's why would we, you know, it feels like we're trying to fix something that ain't broke. You know, it feels like it's just for the sake of it. Here we're asking now about the how and can it fit like this and that, but I want to know the why. Why would coaching, which is a very special conversation, be enhanced by something that's virtual as what we're seeing today? And I want to ask David to answer that question. David, there you go.
I'm going to illustrate it in one simple way, just one part of it.
Yeah.
I'm sticking my hand out now to pat you on the shoulder, and I'm metaphorically.
I felt it, David. I felt it.
You felt it. Okay, that's good. Yeah, but it's very difficult to do that, to get that sense of connection through Zoom. Doing it with an avatar, even though you know it's not a real body, you could do that. Now, I'm not suggesting we're constantly reaching out and you know, and comforting our clients by putting a hand on their shoulder, but it's an illustration of the sense of connectedness. So it's an enhancement of that. Now, you know, when Sam was just talking about the telephone. Telephone is what we would call a skinny medium. you strip out everything. Basically, you're just relying
Yeah.
on the tone of the voice and
Yeah.
the point and so forth. Now that can be very effective. But if we are now going from skimmed milk to full cream, and we really want to engage with our clients, the closer that we can get to being there in reality with them, the better. And I think it's just simple things like not just the avatars themselves, but the environment in which you're doing this. When I was first introduced to virtual reality in a class that Sam was participating in, I was blown away by the fact that we met in a Japanese water garden, and we were able to relax, and then we'd say, right, okay, now let's move somewhere more congenial. And we to a discussion. We moved to a boardroom, but it could have been a walk in the forest. I've done that with people before as well. But we can choose not just to see each other. We can choose the environment in which in the background, and that has an impact. So I think we're going to discover lots of ways in which we can enrich the conversation and the level of connectedness that we have with people. Whether we'll want or need or want to do that all the time, I doubt. But we can, just by getting engaged with it, you begin to see that it is connectedness that's the key thing.
When would you think, David, that we are breaking something that, or what we are fixing that something that ain't broken? With other words, when could it actually do the opposite of what you're trying to achieve?
Well, one of the analogies that I use is using AI to inform having an AI assistant in our coaching practice.
Yes.
At what point does the AI become the coach and we're just an appendage?
Yes.
So
one of the things you've mentioned is that which I could see the point of that, because in the end we don't want to serve tech. Tech's got to serve us. So being able to use a video or whatever, and being able to afterwards actually just review and say, what are we learning about the way we coach? For instance, reflection after action, as opposed to it being involved in. I could see that being really, really good for reflective journaling or anything like that.
Yes, and there's lots of ways in which we can use the technology to help us review, actually as a sort of background supervisor or a first pass on finding issues to take to supervision.
Yes.
So the integration of AI and VR, we haven't really talked about that, but that's part of the whole package. We are experimenting here.
Yeah.
We experiment every time we have a coaching conversation. We are experimenting. Well, if we're not, it's not a coaching conversation. And so with the technology here, this is one more big experiment. Everybody's going to have a different relationship to the technology to everybody else, and that's okay. It's what we feel enables us to serve our clients best. And for some people, that's going to mean a minimum use of technology. For others, it's going to be much more, much deeper.
Thank you so much, David.
It's fun, isn't it?
I'll watch this space.
I think this has reminded me to point out a particular use case for this. Now, Tineke, you might just be a better person than I am, and I'm absolutely happy to accept that. I really don't like Zooming. I'd much rather do things in person. But particularly, I find team coaching through video conferencing platform extremely difficult in comparison.
Yes, I agree with that.
When you've got a headset on, or even as you saw on that little video, so we're not even in headsets, we're still at the laptops, but I can physically turn. And now David is absolutely dominating the conversation, and I can turn so that it's very obvious to everyone I'm not looking at him anymore. I'm looking at Uta and expecting her to speak. That's something you can do in person and you just can't on Zoom. It's very difficult. There will be some research coming out that I did doing team coaching in virtual reality at some point this year, I'm hoping.
So just to add that with Zoom, in South Africa where I live, so many of us either had to emigrate or we had to semigrate. It's a South African word, semigrate, which means we leave the big scary cities and we go and live in some local beautiful villages or coastal seasides. And because of Zoom and we've been able to actually make that move and go and live where we want, because we don't need to have face-to-face coaching anymore. It's all via Zoom. And there's been a huge liberation in South Africa to be able to use something like Zoom. But thank you for that.
Brilliant. And Bjorn Nissen, I can see, is on in the call. Didn't see his name. Bjorn worked with us on that team coaching in VR. Chris, you've been very patiently waiting there. It's lovely to see your face as always. So great to hear from you.
Lovely to hear from you as always, Sam. So I'm really struck by the potential of this, having seen your Mibo film there. And I think where it will help with is, for example, I'm just about to start work with a global cohort of leaders, all of whom are about 30, and all of whom spend all their day on Teams meetings, one after the other. So if coaching comes along and it takes them to a different environment, you're straight away potentially signaling change, which I think could be really interesting for them. It seems also to give you an opportunity not just to be gunning down a camera lens for an hour or an hour and a half, which I know a lot of coaches still find difficult. So in contracting, you spend all the time about how you might behave. It might just be more intuitive and natural in a Mibo environment. What I'm intrigued to know and to ask, and it might be shown in the next part of your film if we go back to that, is what happens when you move, and the movement in a virtual environment. Does it create opportunities for somatic styles of coaching that perhaps you might not have in a Zoom or Teams environment?
Yeah, thank you. Good question. And I'm thinking maybe we ought to return to the video to sort of see what happens there. The way that I wrote an article called Coaching in Virtual Reality, I think, back in 2020. It's still on my LinkedIn, so you can find it there. And I described that as embodied phone coaching, because you do lose the visual piece. But now, because I can hear your voice and I'm sort of in my body much more, and the opening question to the coaching session was, where would you like to be coached today? You can choose the place we'll go to. And then halfway through a coaching session, maybe it's appropriate for us to move to a different place. I remember I coached somebody, it was in the same Japanese water garden, David, that you and I met in. And then we moved into orbit. So we had then gone up into orbit to look at the world and get a more systemic view of what was happening as it visibly moved past us. And it was as if we were having this conversation, remembering that time where once we had been in that garden, even though it was 2 minutes before. There is something that had happened, that because we had made this move visibly, our bodies were convinced that we were on this great journey. And so it can't have been just then. It must have been a long time ago. It was very interesting. Nicola, should we try and watch the second half of the video?
Does the sound come up? Oh yeah, it's it. Actually, when you see Nick Cam top right, that's my view.
So I mean, what I immediately noticed there as I was came down and then went back up and down again is that your voices sort of got louder and quieter. So I know the two of you were having a conversation downstairs, and when I was upstairs, I couldn't hear you. And similarly for David and Andrew when I was down. So we're now in a different part of the space. There are various different sort of arenas that we can meet in. This one's called the studio, and so upstairs is more of a relaxed, informal environment, and this one is perhaps a little bit more corporate feeling. There is a little slide projector here, and so we can present some content onto the screen for us to be able to talk through. And so maybe if when we were up there, that was us as amateurs, and down here, then we are feeling more comfortable with the tool. What's the experience like of sort of going from one state to another? Andrew, you're closest to me, so I'll start with you if that's okay.
It's quite, I mean, obviously I got stuck upstairs, so mild panic, but then I worked out how to overcome that and came tripping down the stairs, and also just think bumping into Nicola, just getting on with the conversation. As you said, when you come down the stairs, suddenly you become aware of conversation. And I kind of sidled up next to them and thought, maybe I'm interrupting here. So I actually came around the other side of the table just to see if they're polite. So I found myself interacting as I would in the real world rather than just jumping in. And then you're mindful that other people are going to stand behind you, so you want to get out the way and have space for them. So it's very, very interesting the way it's changing my behavior and just showing up in the setting rather than just being sitting on a, yeah, it's interesting.
It does strike
like David went off and was looking at caps. I think he was citing up some.
What we've managed to do here, we hadn't planned this, of course. We managed to highlight that there's still technology, and so there are still technical difficulties, and so people do get disconnected, just like we do on Zoom. But I think what Andrew was pointing out there that I think is really interesting is that a tool like this, I think, lends itself very well to team coaching.
Yes.
Where on Zoom, everything's in 2 dimensions. If one person's dominating, it's very difficult to do anything about that.
Nicola, I think maybe we can
very rude and just muting them, which feels very inappropriate.
Probably end the video there, yeah. Because I was just going up to say a thing that I'd already said a moment before. I tend to repeat myself quite a lot. I think it was important to notice, and we lost Andrew at that point. He was joining us from some hotel lobby or airport lounge or something like this. So his internet connection wasn't very good at all. And so just like with every other technology, we saw Nicola sharing the screen earlier, we're having to use the technology, and that's an important part of the way that we're interacting with each other. And so it's we kind of need to be ready for that to happen as we're using any technology. Keely, your hand has just gone down, but I would love to hear what you were going to say.
I think it was a part observation, Sam, which was why I thought I might save it for the breakout group. But I find that I'm a kinesthetic learner myself. Quite a lot of my coaching clients are kinesthetic learners. And those that aren't still benefit from that physical interaction in the room, particularly when you're doing things like free drawing, free writing, that kind of thing, or using certain tools that could be quite cumbersome in a virtual environment. So nothing's excluded in a virtual environment. You can still use a drawing pad and things like that, but in the way we naturally articulate ourselves, either physically or verbally, it doesn't always translate well in the virtual space. And I particularly noticed this during lockdown when all of my calls went virtual. And then as I started, I thought, well, actually, this is great, because then it opens up my network infinitely. But when I actually started to get back into the face-to-face environment, what a gift that was in being able to do some of these things and practice some of these tools and techniques with clients physically. And I'm just wondering how we could preserve some of that in this virtual environment.
Oh, it's wonderful. Honestly, particularly once you get the headset on, there are environments which are designed specifically for collaboration. So there's one which I like to use called Meet in VR. And in that, you've got your hands are in the space, you're physically interacting, and you're completely immersed in this environment. So if you want a pen, this is no joke, I don't need to explain how to use it. You reach up to the side of your head and you pull the pen that's behind your ear, and there is always one there. So you don't need to remember to pack it. There is no time in which you arrive and think, oh, I've left my Post-it notes at home. There are always Post-it notes. That happens to be, you lift up your hand to look at your watch, and then you open up your watch and the stuff is in there. But this pen, you can draw in 3 dimensions, then grab hold of the thing you've just drawn, make it bigger by stretching it out, hold it in the air, look at it from a different angle, walk from to the other side of the room and draw the same thing there. It's the things that you can do in person. A lot of them you can reproduce virtually, and it's actually better because it's cleaner. It's kind of been designed to always work exactly the way it ought to. I'm not saying that we should do that instead of in person. Absolutely we shouldn't. I love in person. That's my favorite. But virtual reality is very pleasant. I think, Adriana, if we hear from you, and then we'll see if we can go into breakout rooms.
Yes, thank you. So it's more of a comment and continuation of this conversation, because I was thinking of this VR usage that's mostly nowadays for gaming, when you are like in a fixed room, and then you have this Mark Zuckerberg interaction, and you have a space where you can actually really move, and it will translate in a movement into that space, and you can also interact with the other person in that virtual space.
Yes, there's going to be a sort of hybrid, I expect, so that it's accessible for everybody around a desk. So, for me to create a space where I can move around, I can probably get a sort of 3 feet by 3 feet square somewhere in my house somewhere, and that's probably the most that I'm going to be able to realistically get on an ongoing basis. For some people, and they'll have a larger space. And yeah, if you can get one of those big rooms that's designed for it and has padded walls so you don't bump into things, and you can really sort of explore a space, that would be great. I think we're gonna see what happens. And if you haven't, it's worth looking up the videos people have been recording of them using the Apple Vision Pro, where people create their calendar, hang it on the wall in one room. It's a digital calendar hanging on the physical wall. They walk out of the room, do something else, still wearing the headset because you can see the environment. And then when you come back into the room, it's still there. This is the sort of thing that is possible to do. It's quite fun.
So of course, if we were in virtual reality, we'd all have little dotted groups around the virtual room, I guess, wouldn't we? And then we're able to see when people are chatting, and then we get the what we have in real life, which is come back now, and no, we're still busy chatting. Round them up.
Well, David will know this. Last week I was trying to do a sort of facilitated session with a group of 25 of us in Mibo.
Yeah.
Wanted us to do a little exercise in a particular space, the area that we were using. And so I had to, physically, virtually wander around the entire space, finding people and saying, could you come over to this room, please? Sorry to cut into your conversation. Can you come to this room, please? It took several minutes and reminded me a lot of what it's actually like to facilitate a live workshop where you send people out into breakout rooms and then go through this exercise of finding where everybody's going, which corners they're going to hide in.
Yeah,
it's quite human.
One thing I haven't seen done, perhaps Sam has seen it done, but to use these technology for open space sessions. So an open space, everybody, you have lots of rooms, and people go to the one which interests them, and if it bores them, they go to another one. To be wandering around conversations. All of that's feasible in the technology.
Yeah, there was a very nice tool, and the name of it has disappeared from my mind now, and it isn't in use anymore. It was made by Microsoft. I can't remember what it was called. VR something. And that was exactly that that sort of thing. You sort of selected the space that you wanted to go into and then jump from one thing to another. I went to a Foo Fighters concert, I think it was, in one of those. There we go. Oh yeah, there you go. No, Natalie, so that's the example of open breakout rooms in Zoom with topics people can move in and out. So that's the sort of Zoom equivalent in an immersive environment. And then you would physically wander from one to the other. So you might bump into people on the way and ask them, what's going on in that conversation.
That's how we do the networking, actually.
Sorry, I was going to say during COVID, I remember people had birthday parties, and there was a bit of software where you could go to somebody's party, and you'd arrive and you'd select what your avatar was, and you wandered around, and as you got close to someone, you began to be able to hear them talking and what they were talking about, and you could move around. It was brilliant, actually.
Well, that's there you go. It sounds like a very similar tool to the one that we were using. So brilliant. See, can work.
But I was also I'm associated with Case Western Reserve. They have a coaching lab where they do research. Richard Boyazzi is part of that, and he and their research, when they were working with a comparison between telephone coaching and virtual platforms and in person in terms of communication efficacy, their conclusion or research showed that as long as both people were comfortable with the technology, that there was no significant difference in the efficacy of the coaching communication. which was a point that was made earlier, that there might still be preferences for different venues, but as long as the coach and the client are comfortable with that venue, it still can be very impactful. So that's a statement I wanted to make.
Thank you very much. Yeah, very relevant. I know we're approaching the end of our time. So Nicola, I know you were going to ask us.
Yeah, I was. Thank you. I mean, thank you for just the fun that we had in the virtual room when we videoed it, which was just hilarious. We just had the best time. So thank you for that. But yeah, the question I just want to ask, actually, Sam, David, and Uta, the same question to all of you. I mean, you've done so much thinking in this particular area and so much playing in this area, and this conversation itself has undoubtedly helped, shaped your thinking and has made you think in maybe different directions as well. So the question really is, what are you yourself taking from this session? What are your own reflections from this session? First question to Sam.
Sure. Well, I think what I really need to take from this is I've been immersed in this kind of world and discussion for a few years now. And so it feels like a lot of the things that I was saying then are still things that we're saying now. But some of those basic things, there's obviously an unconscious assumption in me that other people are catching up with it because I see it all over the place. And so it's really helpful for me to have those the sorts of questions that I was asking several years ago are still questions that need asking and forming answers for. So I'm extremely grateful for everybody who's here today and have been dropping comments and questions into the chat and on your mics as well. So thank you so much. Very grateful.
Thank you, Sam. What about you, David?
Well, I'm thinking how we're going to take this to mainstream, to the extent that in a year's time, shall we say, we have this meeting again, but we all join in virtual reality.
Oh, I would love that. I would love that. Do you know one of the things which I think the pandemic, so it kind of like forced us to use the technology a little bit more. I think somebody said at the very, very beginning, there's a requirement to do things a little bit for. And I think it'd be fantastic to have a little play in a year's time and see different technologies that we could use if we wanted to. But then what the driver for that might have been, whether it was a push or a pull, that'd be an interesting one. I'll put you down for that, David.
Yeah, well, I look forward to being able to say my avatar will see you shortly.
What about you, Uta?
Yeah, personally, I like technology, but I could also hear from this discussion that technology can be a friend or can be a foe, can be, your best partner in the coaching relationship or can get in the way. So I think what we need to maybe think more about is we have variety, we have abundance, different tools, different possibilities of how we can connect with our clients and making an educated choice, both as coaches and also with the client together, what is the best means to accomplish what we want to accomplish. And I think it's great that we have the variety now in the choice, but it's making it also hard because when we have choices, it's more difficult than when we are so limited. So let's explore and let's experiment, I would say.
Oh, thank you. I think exploration and experimentation is I know that curiosity is what leads to innovation, doesn't it? And it leads to new ways of thinking. And this discussion has just been so great. So Sam, David, Uta, thank you so much. Let me give you a big EMCC Global thank you for everything that you've brought to us today. Thank you.